So Qatari negotiators are in Tehran right now to help de-escalate the situation between the U.S. and Iran. This as President Trump says Iran has requested for talks to continue. For more, let's bring in Fox News contributor and former Obama State Department spokesperson Marie Harf and retired Navy Captain Brent Sadler. Good to see you both on this Saturday. There's always something cooking on a Saturday. It's never boring. So let me start with you, Brent. The Trump administration wants the Iranians to come out and say the Strait of Hormuz is safe. You can pass freely through it. We will not attack ships. Do you think they're going to do it?
No. And it's also, even if they did, it's not good enough. At this stage, after several weeks of back and forth in this cycle of attack, then pause, then renegotiate and wash and refresh and do again, I think we're going to have to do two things at once. One, continue the attacks along the Straits of Hormuz to remove any leverage or threat the Iranians pose to shipping, to get that confidence that's already starting to come back, by the way, the shippers going through the straits, while at the same time, at the pace of the choosing when the Iranians are ready, to have deliberate discussions and negotiate what the next steps are.
And the blockade. And the blockade was working, right?
Yes, and I think the blockade is back in effect de facto, because as soon as Secretary Treasury Besson said, you know, the waivers are revoked, that is the financial mechanism for the deals. That's back on.
Maria, I want to ask you about the CBS reporting today that Iran privately admitted to the Trump administration that they messed up in the Strait of Hormuz. They hit these ships mistakenly because there's some sort of a divide within the regime between the hardliners and the more moderates, I guess you want to call them, that want to actually work with the president. And J.D. Vance, the vice president, has mentioned this before. There's two factions that they're kind of sort of dealing with, and it makes the negotiations tough. Number one, do you buy that from the Iranians, that's what's going on? Or are they just saying whatever they want to say just to delay?
Well, I do think there are parts of the Iranian government that are more hardline when it comes to the United States than others. I also think that the government that's in place today feels like they want to take some revenge on the Trump administration because not only did they kill the supreme leader and a number of other leaders, that's very personal for them, right? There were family members killed as well. But I actually think the Iranians feel like they have a lot of leverage right now. They have seen that they can shut down global trade in the Strait, that they can create a very unstable economic situation, and they know that President Trump cares about that. He cares about the flow of oil. He cares about the markets. And they also know, or they suspect, that he does not want to start a full-scale war again. They follow our politics as much as anyone. They know that the midterms are coming up. They know that the full-scale war was not particularly popular. And so, look, if they can keep the United States engaged, the United States hits, then the Iranians hit back, while creating this instability, the Iranians actually feel like they have a lot of leverage here because they don't think President Trump, look, even if he were to rain missiles down like he keeps threatening, the Iranian regime survived that. They have now seen U.S. military power, and while it hurt them, they're still in power. They're still in charge.
Let me ask you, Brent, to respond to that, because you know they should care too, because if they get slammed by these economic sanctions, they get slammed by the blockade, it hurts, and so do these strikes, and they have to rebuild their military. Why don't they care?
Well, the calculation in Tehran by the IRGC, which really is the center of power right now, it's called calling the shots here. Their big primary concern is being able to stay in power and stay alive, and their threat is their own people. It's a regime that is widely unpopular, as we saw in the protests and the crackdown that followed in January, with upwards of 10,000, in some accounts even higher, that they murdered or they killed on the streets to suppress that. So they're teetering on their ability to maintain control. And so anything that threatens that, and again, I think a lot of the bluster that you see is a function of that, to make them look stronger for domestic consumption as well. And so again, I think as long as these attacks continue on the IRGC's naval presence and maritime presence, taking away any confidence that they have in the ability to threaten shipping, that takes that leverage off the table. The other thing is, that aside, the results speak for themselves. Lloyd's List has just come out looking at the shipping rates. They've doubled from May to June. Now, July is already showing higher shipping rates, despite the resumption of attacks, basically the calling off of the ceasefire and the MOU. The key thing on this also to remember is we're never going to go back to what the shipping was the day before the conflict. Half of the crude oil shipments now can go over pipelines through Saudi Arabia and through the UAE. So we never have to go back to the same level.
So, okay, but are you also saying that will we ever see a Strait of Hormuz functioning without U.S. military or naval assets in the Strait, ensuring that, traffic is moving safely. Will we ever see that day again?
Yes, I think it's inevitable because Iran has pitted themselves against the rest of the world on the understandings of freedom of navigation. That's international strait.
Marie, I got to ask you for your expertise on what's happening with Syria. The president is asking Syria to intervene when it comes to dealing with Hezbollah. I think some folks in the region were a little bit shocked, a little nervous about that because of the history of Syria and Lebanon. This is Marco Rubio here, the Secretary of State. This is what he said about just removing Syria from the terrorism list. Lifting sanctions on Syria will unlock international trade and investment, give Syria a chance to rebuild, and opening up a new chapter for the Syrian people. A stable, unified Syria at peace with itself and its neighbors benefits not only the region, but the entire world. What do you make of this sort of cozying up, warming up to the idea of even working with Syria?
I mean, for those of us who worked on the Syria civil war, it was hard to imagine this day. But even a lot of Democrats support removing Syria from the state sponsor of terrorism designation because it's the only way to really invest in the reconstruction of this country. Now, look, we have to maintain our ability to go after counterterrorism targets if and when they exist in Syria, and I think everybody wants that. But this is a very different path than many of us would have thought could be the case several years ago, even. And, the difference between Syria and Iran, right? Syria went through this civil war. Their people were fighting against the government.
They're sick of it.
But it took over a decade to actually cause the fall of the Assad regime. When I look at Iran and their support for Hezbollah and the difference there, I think in some ways this war has made the regime more popular because they are rallying around the flag as they have this external enemy. I agree. I mean, what we saw the Iranian government do to their people in the streets looked a lot like what the Syrians had done, what Assad had done a decade ago. And the countries are in very different places today. I hope there's a different future for Syria. I think we should all be cautious as we enter into agreements with this new government. But we have to show countries there's a different path and there's a different way to have a relationship with the U.S.
Specifically, though, Brent, on Syria helping us manage Hezbollah, even the ambassador to Israel, Mike Huckabee, was on with me earlier and said there are other better ideas out there.
Well, I think this regime in Damascus right now could be very helpful in preventing an IRGC return into Lebanon. Right now, we are at an interesting historic moment between the national government in Beirut, Israel, and the United States to finally deliver a disarming of Hezbollah and to really put to rest the civil war in Lebanon that's dragged on with Iranian help and arms.
Brent, Marie, thank you for joining me.
Thank
Great to see you in studio.
You too.
Have a great weekend.
All right, thanks for watching. Check out my new podcast, Hanging Out with me, Sean Hannity. The big interviews, the debates you won't get anywhere else. Like and subscribe for new episodes every Tuesday and Thursday.